Hi everybody, today we're going to look at Pashto inflections in real life. How do people actually use these things? So to do that, we're going to look at a piece of poetry by Inayat Shah Pardes and have a listen to it, and I'll give you the first couple of lines and then we'll start analyzing a pattern that he uses over and over again.
زه چې د مینې لیونۍ سره مخ شوی یم زه چې د مینې لیونۍ سره مخ شوی یم د ډېرې ستړې زندګۍ سره مخ شوی یم
Okay, don't worry if you didn't understand a lot of that, but we're going to look at this one pattern here. He says da something and sara. So this is a sandwich, and this is like that. You can see there's your sandwich, and it's da and sara, meaning with. So here's the pattern that he uses over and over again. He says da something sara makhshewayam, which means I've been faced with, or I've come face to face with. And so the verb here is makhshewayam, which is the perfect form of makhkidal, but we're not so worried about that. That just means, to encounter or to come to face with. But what we're looking at in this video is the pattern da and sara, which is a sandwich that we use to talk about being with something. Da blank sara. Now, some people say for the standard written Pashto or more standard Pashto, it will be la blank sara, but this poet here says da sara, so we'll use that version of the sandwich. So, in this sandwich, you're always going to stick a noun phrase. Some noun or a phrase describing a noun goes inside that sandwich, and that will get inflected. You stick an NP in the sandwich and you inflect it. So here's the pattern. When you have a sandwich, you take a plain NP, noun phrase, and you stick it in the sandwich and you inflect it. That's all. Stick it in the sandwich and inflect it. So, for example, if we were to say, I've been faced with a problem, stunza. So we are going to have to, before we stick it in the sandwich, we're going to have to inflect it. So if we look at our inflections, if you look that word up in the dictionary, you'll see an inflection chart. Then we have our plain form, stunza, but we want to use the inflected form. First inflection here, stunzi. So we say, the stunzi sara makhshewayam. I've been faced with a problem. Or if there's a man, ستړې. Well, again, if we want to stick this in the sandwich, we're going to have to inflect it. So if we look at our inflection chart, ستړې inflects to ستړي. So we would say, the ستړي سره مخ شوی یم. I have been faced with a man. A noun phrase can be more than just one word, though. It can be a whole phrase describing a noun. For instance, in the poem, he talks about zindagۍ, life. But we also adds an adjective to that. So he says it's a tired life. So we can build on our noun phrase by adding an adjective. In this case, ستړې. Notice that's the feminine form of that adjective. And then not only that, but he also adds an intensifier saying very tired life. ډېره. ډېره ستړې زندګۍ. And notice ډېره also is the feminine form of that, because this all has to agree. So when we inflect that, we don't just inflect the head, as it's called, or the main word in the noun phrase. We got to inflect it all the way down. So zindagۍ inflects to zindagۍ. And then our adjective is also going to have to inflect, but for this particular adjective, it doesn't change, it stays the same. And then the intensifier is also going to have to inflect. So we don't say ډېره, we say ډېرې.
د ډېرې ستړې زندګۍ سره مخ شوی یم د ډېرې ستړې زندګۍ سره مخ.
Okay, we can see that he inflected things there. Let's review again how he does that. Zindagۍ is the word for life, but he also says it's a tired life, ستړې. But it's not ستړې because that's masculine. It's ستړې, feminine. So ستړې زندګۍ, and then it's a very tired life. And in this case, ډېر, we have to use the feminine form, ډېره, like that. So the noun phrase that we're going to stick in the sandwich is ډېره ستړې زندګۍ, a very tired life. That is the plain form. But if we're going to stick it in the sandwich, we need to inflect it, the whole thing. So zindagۍ turns into zindagۍ. And ستړې is just the same, plain and inflected like that. And then ډېره inflects to ډېرې. So what he says in the sandwich is,
د ډېرې ستړې زندګۍ سره مخ شوی یم د ډېرې ستړې زندګۍ سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, let's look at another line of his poem. Have a listen to this.
د کلیوالې پښتنې سره مخ شوی یم.
He is talking about Pashtun, but it's a feminine Pashtun, Pakhtana, like that. And it's also a village. Like you can say Kaliwal can be a villager or the adjective being like a village person. Kaliwal. So if we said a Pashtun from the village, we could say a Kaliwal Pakhtun. But this is a female, so we have to use the female version of that adjective. Kaliwala Pakhtana. So our noun phrase that we're going to stick in the sandwich, the thing that he is talking about, is a Kaliwala Pakhtana, village Pashtun. But to stick it in the sandwich, we have to inflect it. So we're going to inflect Pakhtana to Pakhtane and Kaliwala to Kaliwali. So he says, the Kaliwali Pakhtane sara.
د کلیوالې پښتنې سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, next line.
زه د یو داسې بیمارۍ سره مخ شوی یم.
بیماری, it's talking about sickness, and such a sickness. That's kind of a determiner he uses there. And then he also says the word yo for one. Now, he doesn't do this in this poem, but often people will inflect the word one as well to be yoa. So yoadasi bimari is the noun phrase that we're using. And if we want to stick it in the sandwich, we need to inflect it. We say bimari changes to bimarei, and dasi doesn't change, it's just like that. And yoa is going to change into yoi. So the yuidasi bimarei sara. Now, he doesn't inflect the word yo there, he just uses it. This is something often people will drop some of the inflections for words like yo. So have a listen.
زه د یو داسې بیمارۍ سره مخ شوی یم. زه د یو داسې بیمارۍ سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, next line.
زه د حلاتو د چپې سره مخ شوی یم.
Chapa is a wave. This time he does something interesting. He adds a possessive. So the possessive, it's the wave of what? Whose wave? Or whatever wave. So we say a possessive or a genitive. People might say saying where this is, like where this is from or whose wave this is. It's the circumstance. So halat. Now that's a masculine plural noun. So when we add the little da for the possessive, we're going to have to inflect that because it's like another little mini sandwich. The halato. That's the possessive. The halato. And so our phrase is the halato chapa. But here's something we really need to pay attention to. This part here is the possessive. So what happens when we stick this into the sandwich? Well, that possessive kind of hangs out of the side of the sandwich. It goes before the sandwich. And then the main part of the noun phrase, that's not the possessive, that part gets inflected. So chapa is going to inflect to chape. So once the halato chapa goes into the sandwich, it's going to be the halato de chape sara.
زه د حلاتو د چپې سره مخ شوی یم.
And notice here is the sandwich, and the main part is inside the sandwich, but the possessive hangs off the side. Now, to help you remember how this works, imagine a big chicken burger like this, with a chicken leg hanging out of it. So here's your sandwich, and then inside of the sandwich you have a noun phrase. This is all inflected with all of its lovely sauces and stuff, and then hanging out of it is the possessive. So if there's a possessive, then it will hang outside of the sandwich. You're welcome. That's a pretty gross picture, but I don't think you're going to forget that the possessive hangs out of the sandwich now. For instance, sta kitab is your book, and if we put it in the sandwich da sara or la sara, then the sta part, that possessive, is going to hang out of the outside of the sandwich, like sta de kitab sara, with your book. There's the sandwich, and there's the possessive hanging out on the outside, like a gross chicken leg. Okay, next line of our poem, we have...
د خپل قسمت د فیصلې سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, so he's talking about فیصله, a decision. But he also adds possessive on this one, a decision of what? Of fate, قسمت. Whose fate? Adds the determiner to say own, like my own, خپل. So the خپل قسمت is basically like my own fate or one's own fate. And so the noun phrase that we're going to put in the sandwich is the خپل قسمت فیصله. When we put this in the sandwich, remember the possessive is going to hang off the side, and we're going to have to inflect فیصله to فیصلې.
د خپل قسمت د فیصلې سره مخ شوی یم. د خپل قسمت د فیصلې سره مخ شوی یم.
So here's the sandwich there. the فیصلې سره, and then the possessive hangs off the side. Okay, so let's look at another example.
د داسې بندې دروازې سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, so he's talking about a door and a closed door. So band is closed, but if it's a door is feminine, so we're talking about a banda darwaza, a closed door. And then he says dasi, the determiner being like such. So the noun phrase is dasi banda darwaza, such a closed door. When we stick this in the sandwich, we're going to have to inflect darwaza to darwazi, and then banda to bandi, and dasi doesn't change. So he says,
د داسې بندې دروازې سره مخ شوی یم. د داسې بندې دروازې سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, let's look at another one.
زه د هجران د اوږدې شپې سره مخ شوی یم.
Okay, so the head of this noun phrase is shpa, meaning night, but it's a long night, ugad, long. And so when we make that feminine, we say ugda shpa. But the long night of what? Of separation, hijran. So we're going to add the possessive like that, the hijran, and we get the hijran ugda shpa, the long night of separation. When we put that in the sandwich, again, there's the possessive. We're going to take shpa, and it's going to be shpe, and ugda is going to inflect to ugde. And the possessive just hangs on the outside of the sandwich.
زه د هجران د اوږدې شپې سره مخ شوی یم. زه د هجران د اوږدې شپې سره مخ شوی یم.
There's your sandwich. Notice the adjective goes inside the sandwich along with the noun, and the possessive hangs off of the side. So let's look at, if we remember the time he said, the kلیوالې پښتنې سره. Now, what if he was talking about multiple people here? Here's just one, right? Singular, and then we inflect it because it's in the sandwich. But what if it's plural as well? This is when things get interesting. So if we have kلیوال پښتون, and it's feminine, so kلیواله پښتانه, a female Pashtun, and then if we inflect that to make it plural this time. So let's say it's village Pashtuns. So we'd say کلیوالې پښتنې. And now this is plural, but we use the inflection for plural. So here our noun phrase is کلیوالې پښتنې, and it hasn't even gone in the sandwich yet. This already looks inflected, but it's inflected because it's plural, not because it's in the sandwich. So if we go to stick it in the sandwich, what can we do? Well, we have to use the second inflection, the double inflection. It's like pushing the button all the way down. So we say پښتنو, کلیوالو پښتنو. The kلیوالو پښتنو سره, with village Pashtuns, like that. We can take a lot of the lines in his poem and try to make them plural and see how this works. For instance, the حلاتو چپه, wave of circumstances, is going to be the حلاتو د چپې سره, like he said. But what if this were plural waves to begin with? The حلاتو چپې. Now, see if you can stick this in the sandwich. How would you do that? You can pause the video and try. It is the حلاتو د چپو سره. Notice the possessive is hanging outside of the sandwich. It doesn't change, but we will have to use a double inflection to get the chapi, the plural waves, into the sandwich, chapo. Another example would be dasi banda darwaza. We put it in the sandwich and it turns to dasi bandi darwazi sara, with such a closed door. But what if there are doors? Dasi bandi darwazi, such closed doors. And we want to stick those multiple doors inside of a sandwich. A sandwich with doors in them would be difficult to eat. But anyways, so we would say, dasi bando darwazo sara. We're using the double inflection because we already used one inflection for plural, so we have to use the second inflection for the sandwich. Another example, the hijran ugda shpa. Once we stick it in the sandwich, it's the hijran, the ugde shpe sara, with the long night of separation. But if we're talking about nights, the hijran ugde shpe, if the plain version is plural, before we stick it in the sandwich, it's plural, then we're going to have to use a double inflection once it goes in the sandwich. The hijran de ugdo shpo sara, just like that. Now, the last thing I want to just emphasize or say is that when we have a possessive attached to something, the inflection that happens inside the possessive is its own thing. So, for example, if I say the man's problem, the ستړي ستونزه, and I stick it inside a sandwich, then I say the ستړې د ستونزې سره with a man's problem. That possessive is hanging outside of the sandwich, and the inflection is because of the blank. That possessive there turns, I don't say the ستړې, I say the ستړې د ستونزې سره. If this was plural and it was the ستړې ستونزې, and then I put it inside the sandwich, it's the ستړې د ستونزو سره. Now notice the ستړې doesn't change if it's singular, or if it's if the thing in the sandwich is singular or the thing in the sandwich is plural, the thing in the possessive doesn't change. That is that inflection is just to do with the possessive. It's just kind of hanging outside of the sandwich. So I hope that was helpful to just give you some examples of how inflections are used in real life. Keep your eye open for how people use inflections in speech, in books, in poetry, in everything. And in the description, there will be a link to the full original performance of that poem, as well as a transcript and translation. So you can study the rest of the poem as well. All right, thanks so much for watching.